everyone, it's the middle of nap time, so I'm going to try to keep my voice down. But I wanted to talk about how to do bullion roses on top of smocking. This was requested by one of my patrons, and yeah, let's dive into it. So, first of all, I'm going to show this with embroidery floss. That's what's most commonly used with bullion roses, and so I've just picked up a handful of colors here, and I tried to get some that are contrasting for the video, so hopefully they show up better. So I have another video that dives deeper into needles, but these are what I would recommend is something with this sort of shape. Okay, so this is technically called a sharp's needle, but you see the shape, the eye of the needle is the same width as like the shaft. It just goes straight up. You don't want an eye that's going to flare out. That would be not so great for bullion roses. So here, this is called a millimeter needle, if I'm saying that right. And again, it's the same sort of shape. It just goes all the way up. The eye of the needle does not flare out. Now, the diameter or the width or whatever you want to call it of that needle is going to determine, it's going to be one of the things that determines how wide your bullion petals are, how wide that stitch is. So that's one thing to consider when picking out a needle. The other thing is that you want it to be longer. So even though that's called a millimeter, that's called a sharp, those three would all work fine. You don't want something like this because those are not as long. You see, those are about what, 1.25 inches or something, and it just doesn't give you that much room to grab onto, and you'll see what I mean in a second when I start doing the stitches. So I'm gonna pick something like this. Stone frame. I've just smocked up this little sample, and let's go ahead and do a bullion bullion rosebud, blah blah blah. So for starters, we're just going to use one strand of floss. Let's pull that out. Couple different ways to secure it. One, you could just do the good old-fashioned, trusty knot in the back. The other thing you could do, or a other thing, I think there's more than two methods here, but particularly with it just being one strand, that knot in the back is not going to be all that big. So what you can do, another thing you can do is go to the back of your work. Like I said, this is just a sample that I smocked, or that I pleated up, so it doesn't have any smocking on it. But you could, if you pretended that knot wasn't there, you could just hold on to the tail, go through, I like to go through 2 pleats, and then wrap it twice around your needle and pull tight, and that'll kind of like sew in a knot, and secure it to your work. Now, if I was doing this for real, and not just on a sample, I would have done all my smocking first. If I was going to smock anything here, I would have done all that first, and then gone back and done the bullion roses on top of it. If I just wanted the pleats without any smocking, then I would have done all my back smocking first, and again, gone back with the pleats. So, to do a rosebud, I like to keep, when I do bullion roses, now I've just kind of picked this up on my own, so I don't know if this is right or not, but this is how I do it. I like to keep things on top of my pleats. So you see that where I entered is on top of my pleat, and now I'm going to pick something, and this is entirely up to you how big you want to make these, but I'm going to go just to the side of that. Alright? And I've got mine angled a little bit. So I've gone through 2 of these pleats like so. Now this is why it's really nice to have a long needle, because you're going to need some working space. It does not matter, in my opinion, which way you wrap your bullions. I've done it both ways. They look the same. And you're going to wrap until the amount of wraps is roughly the same space that you're trying to fill. If you get into like a hairy situation, it's generally better to have one extra wrap than one less wrap, because you can kind of smush it together instead of having a sparse petal, if that makes sense. So then you just pull through and lay it down. Now this I'm actually kind of glad this happened. I pulled this too tight, and you can see I pulled it too tight because the bottom of it kind of tapers out. That's easily fixed. Just take your needle underneath and give it a fluff, and you can see now it's all good. So the last part of this stitch is to put it down where it exits, okay? What I like to do is I'll go like to the top of that previous petal, and then I'll go back down here. And what going to the top of that previous petal will do is it will kind of force this next petal. Rosebuds are generally done in 2 petals, okay? So you've got this first one, and now we're making the second one, and going to the top of the first one forces the second one to kind of wrap around that first one, which I like the look of that. So again, I am just wrapping until I get to a point where it's going to take up, actually that's probably too many. That looks good. Goes to a point where it's gonna like fill that gap. And I'm holding on to my bullion, like to those wraps with my pointer finger and thumb. You can let go of it, just be careful. You're gonna flip it back down. Sometimes this happens. Just carefully put that sucker down. And then I like to put my thumb on top of it once I have it flipped, and again, and so I can continue like tugging, pulling that taut. And you can see now this guy is wrapped around the first one. I hope you can see that. And I'm just going to put my needle down. And so that's a little rosebud. And you could take a little like lazy daisy. Let me get another needle with some green on it. You could do a bullion leaves on either side of the rose. What I like to do instead is just take a lazy daisy and use that to frame up to make a little leaf there. And if you wanted a tail, you could do that. If you didn't want, you just wanted like the leaf, you could do that. Let's add a little tail. So we put this down, something like that, and you got yourself a little tail, a little stem. Now let's move on to doing a rose. So if we were to go up in this region, again, I'm keeping this towards the top of those pleats. Now the first step of a rose, at least when I do it, let me adjust the focus. I wish this had autofocus, but it does not. So the first step of a rose when I do it is I'll do 2 bullion. I think I like always do 2 pleats with the center of a rose. I think that's right. But so I've turned my work kind of horizontally and 90 degrees, whatever. And I'm doing a couple wraps. And let's do one more. And I'm gonna again hold it, pull it through, and layer over with my thumb on top of it like so. Let's not squish these so far. So that's good. And then I'm gonna come up right next to it. And when you come up on these bullions, one of the things that like makes your bullion look really nice, in my opinion, is coming right next to it. So you can see I've come up right next to the thing, okay? And then wrap. And when you do these wraps, the amount you just want to wrap, and you just want it to like touch your needle. But you can see I'm like, you can see there's still a good amount. I mean, it's not loosey-goosey, but it's not super tight. When I was learning how to do these things, I was like teaching myself, and I would get it super taut, and then I would take my fingers together and try to pull it through. And I was doing quite a bit of them trying to learn. I mean, my fingers were red. Like, I was building up calluses and stuff. I was getting it way too tight. You should be able to easily slide those wraps along your needle. So again, I've filled up my space, so I'm going to pinch my wraps. Ooh, I did not pinch my wraps all that well, did I? That's okay, that sometimes happens. Alright. And pull her through. So now I have the center of my rose. Okay, I'm gonna put that down, and I'm gonna pick another color. Hopefully that will help with the visuals. So I'm gonna take 2 strands, and we're gonna discuss how that works. I'm just gonna knot it. Now I did separate my strands, and then I kind of like bring them back together. This is going to, if you've done smocking before, and I do have a video on how to smock, please watch the updated video and not the original. The original is rough. I think I uploaded the wrong edit or something, and of course it's my video with the most views, and it's so roughly edited. But anyway, so when you work with 2 strands, whether that's smocking or bullion roses, you want to keep those multiple strands together, and you want them to be like next to each other. You do not want them to be twisted. So like if I had my fibers twisted up like that, it would look like a hot mess. So I just want to make sure, and the entire strand, like the whole thing of thread, doesn't have to be flat next to each other, or untwisted, whatever you want to call it, but you do want the portion that you're doing the bullion rose to be flat, untwisted, whatever the description is. Okay, so I'm going to do 3 petals at this point. What I like to do spacing wise is I like to start, I've come up just, is that in focus? I wish this had autofocus. Okay, so I've come up just like on the corner of that the center rose, the center bullion. That makes sense, okay? Just on that corner. And I'm going right next to that bullion, like where I came up. Not the bullion. You see, I'm right next to it. So I'm going to give myself some working space on that needle. I'm going to make sure that this part here is not twisted, and I'm going to wrap. And as I'm wrapping, you can see there is some twist right there, and I just untwist it before I wrap. Okay, so like I said, the whole thing does not have to be untwisted. Just the portion that you're working with has to be untwisted for it to look, you know, to lay nice and pretty. Because it like, okay, so let me do this on purpose. If I have this twisted up, and then I go to do a bullion, you can see the difference, I hope, on the camera. And you can see how it just gets untidy. So I'm gonna undo those twisted wraps and keep them untwisted, laying nice and flat together. That's probably good enough, or long enough, whatever. I'm going to hold that just like I've done with the other ones and pull her through. put your thumb over it and continue to pull. And I like to pull, kind of like wrap it in the direction that I want that petal to go. So I'm going to have it hug, you know, hug the center of the rose, and then I'll deliberately put it over. Like, that's fine. You aren't going to be able to see it, and what putting it over like that in the direction that I want it to go is it'll go in that direction. It kind of just gives it that tension, and you can see now I've wrapped it around my rose. If that was smocked, it would stay together. So now I'm, like I said, I'm making 3 rose petals. So I'm going to come up kind of in the middle of this previous rose petal, maybe like 2/3, somewhere around there. It's not rocket science. And you can of course play with the spacing and see what you like. And I tell you what, you can try to make, you can make a rosebud and then try to like do the same exact one, follow the same exact steps, same spacing, all that stuff, and it's going to look different, because that's the beauty of handwork. It's just the nature of it, you know. So I'm coming up, again, I'm going about 180 like degrees from where I came up, and I'm going just to the right of it. Alright, something like that. Giving myself some working space and going around, making sure to untwist as I go. And the other thing about this is that if it's not looking pretty on your needle at this point, it's not going to get any better, okay? So don't think, if it doesn't look pretty at this point where it's nice and flat and you know, nicely laying on your needle, if you pull that needle through, it's just gonna, don't pull the needle through. Undo it and get it so it's looking pretty on your needle, because like I said, it's not gonna get any better. There's no like special prayer you can say or something to save yourself. So here we go. Flipping that down, putting your thumb over it, and pulling it in the direction that I want it to go. And then the last one, I'm going to go about halfway. Set my needle up. And what I like to do is I like to go just beyond where I started. Alright? Now if this was smocked together, it would be a little bit neater, but that's okay. So I'm going to go just beyond. You can see here is where that first rose petal started. So I'm going to go just beyond, kind of there, and come up just to the right, not catching those threads or those that floss, whatever you want to call it, that fiber. And I'm going to do the wraps. You hear my laundry in the background. You might be able to hear my husband out there working. We're adding 900 square feet onto our house right now. I say we, but it's really him. I'm inside with the kiddos. It's going to be so nice though. We're having a playroom with a half wall, separating my new sewing space and office from them, so hopefully I'll be able to supervise them while doing some sewing and some office work, editing videos, whatever. I'm really looking forward to that next year. I'm hoping that we'll be able to make being able to do content so much easier, because we are out of space, folks. Okay, so I need to fluff that up a little bit. I kind of pulled that a little too tight again. You can just put your needle right in those, am I in focus? You can just put your needle right in and kind of just give it a fluff, and all is good. So I want this to be tucked behind that first petal. That's just the aesthetic. So I think that if you were to leave it like that, where it just sort of sticks up, it just looks a little bit not as clean, not as tidy. So instead, I will tuck that last petal behind the first one. I'll just send my needle, you know, down past that first one. And then you can see, give it a little tug, it goes right, what's the word? Right underneath of it. So, if you wanted to continue, I've only seen bullion rose petals done in like, so you know you have the rose bud, but if you're going to do an actual rose, I've only seen the petals done in like odd numbers. So like you could have 3 petals, you could do 5 petals, and so on and so forth. There's of course nothing saying you can't do an even number. I just think that it kind of goes back to design and symmetry and keeping things balanced with, you know, the whole odd thing. So odd numbers. So that would be a rosebud. Again, you can do bullion leaves if you wanted to, or I really like to stick with lazy daisies. Although another really fun option, like if you had a bunch of little roses, you could just do French knots, kind of like throughout, you know, sort of trailing up and down that those roses, and that would be really pretty, I think. So I hope that's helpful on how to do roses on top of, or really any bullion. You could do a bunch of bullion things out of bullions. There's a whole book by, it's A to Z. A to Z has a series of things, whether that's bullion roses, whether that's just smocking in general. They have one on white work. They just have a series of books, and one of them's on bullions, and you could do any of these bullions on top of smocking. So I'm not really sure what else to talk about when it comes to this, but if I have missed something, if you'd like me to go into more, you know, depth on a certain aspect or whatever, I'm more than happy to do that. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.